Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. We have many people from different parts of the world. So wonderful to see you. Ala, wonderful to see you here. Oh, I see Eva as well. Oh, we have
Glad to
from
see
all over the
you.
world.
Hi.
Hi, Natalia. Wow, fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Welcome.
Okay, we'll just wait a couple of, just a minute, I think. Let's wait for a minute and then we'll get it started. So I saw that like there were like more than 80 participants who registered for the event. So Francesca will take care of some people who wanna join. Yeah. Okay, welcome everybody to this wonderful AGTCL webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for the event. So they have graciously agreed to do this with us and then support AGTCL teachers, AGTCL community, and then from attendees from around the world. So I mean, it is open for everybody to join. So I'm not going to take much time introducing our guest speaker, and then I'll just take it over and give it over to the guest speaker, and then they will do a very nice interactive session for us. Here today we have Luis and Hilda. So our guest speaker, I'm going to read their bios that they provided to us. I mean, they provided me a very long list of their, accomplished works, but I'm going to read out in their short bios that they provided to us. So Luis is a full professor at Academia Ekonomicznego in Poland. So sorry for mispronouncing that name because that is difficult for me. The coordinator of the graduate certificate. At the George Washington University, United States, and co-editor of Tapestry, multimedia journal for teachers and English learners. So Luis will actually, promote that. I think to the attendees here about their journal. So to learn more about Luis, so you can also you may have seen his website, very impressive one on the website that we promoted on our website, AGT's website. So we have Hilda, who is the guest speaker for today's webinar. She is the Assistant Dean in the College of Education at Towson University and co-editor of the same journal, Tapestry, multimedia journal for teachers and English learners. She has contributed. And I sorry for the disturbance. She has contributed, books like social emotional learning in the English language learning classrooms with Luis, which is one of the best sellers from TESOL publications and co-editor of Tapestry Journal. So you might have seen her website and then some of the works that she has done. Are you guys hearing me or is it okay?
Yeah, your volume is very low. Want to raise your...
Oh, sorry for that. Without further ado, I would like to invite guest speaker Luis and Hilda, to start the session from their end. So welcome everybody to the session.
Thank you very much, Madhu. Thank you very much, everyone. And first and foremost, to Francesca, Madhu, and the Arizona TESOL team, thank you so much for the invitation. I am so happy to be here. Hilda and I were so happy to see many familiar faces and new faces. And we have so many people from all parts of the world. I see here Hamisu from Nigeria. We have a lot of teacher friends here from Ukraine. I saw a couple of teachers from Poland. We have Eva from also this part of the world in Austria, if I remember correctly. Eva, please remind me if I said it. Yes. All right, good. So many wonderful people, and then of course we have people from the US. So this is truly an international conversation. Thank you so much. I want to share with all of you first and foremost, and this is our check-in activity that I would like to have us do first, please. This is a word cloud. I don't know if you're familiar with menti.com, but I would like to ask you to please share with us 1 or 2 words that describe how you're feeling today. And I'm going to share the screen. So as you start sharing your responses, then we'll start seeing the word cloud being formed, right? And perhaps 1, 2 words to describe how you're feeling today. And then I think I added it here in the chat box. Let me double check. Excited.
Yes,
Thank
the
you.
link is at the very beginning.
Okay, good. And let me share again in case, because sometimes it goes down, but let me just share it again. Excited, motivated, happy, tired. Yes, tired. That's why we need coffee, right? Like teachers, we're always coffee. I'm ready. Coffee, energized, good. Thank you. Phenomenal, enthusiastic. Thank you. Cloudy. I hope things get better after the webinar. I hope we can share some rays of shine, some rays of sun, right, to make you feel better. Thrilled. Thank you. Good. Motivated. Excited. It's in the center right there. Fantastic. Sleepy but excited. Spacey. Good. Thank you so much. This is a good activity. I always like to check in with my students, and I love Menti. So this is one of the big things that I always do. If you have worked with me in the past, or you have seen some of my activities, you've definitely seen me use Menti before, because I love it. And Hilda and I, we use it in our conversations as well. So thank you so much for getting started with the check-in activity. It's going to be there, so we can come back later. I know we have more people, so you can continue to input your responses, and then we'll come back to it. But now we want to make our conversation very, very active. So I'm going to let Hilda share the PowerPoint, and we're going to get started, because we do want to have our conversation more than a lecture today. So I'm going to stop
so
talking.
Madhu, can you please let me share my screen, and then I'll be happy to share this PowerPoint. We can get this party started.
Yeah.
I just made you a co-host. You can.
There it is. Okay, perfect. All righty. So do you see it all right there, or do you see it?
You have to share the like from beginning, and then it's gonna share the whole thing, I think, because it's just showing or maybe at the bottom, Hilda, also you can present at the bottom, like presenter view.
Let's see. Better?
No, we still see all the slides.
Okay, wait, let me see here. Give me a second.
And this is a social emotional learning activity on how to deal with technology.
Right?
Which
yes,
happens all the time.
Let's see here.
Hilda, I think if you go up to the upper left-hand side of your screen, which says from current slide, hit that, and it should put it in presenter view.
Yeah, I was. No, for the first, the one on the left, all the way from the beginning.
Here?
That one. Yeah, that one.
Oh, I see what the problem is. It's projecting on this other screen over here.
Oh.
Okay, so it's not projecting on the right screen. Ah, okay. Sorry about that. Let me see. I'm trying to get it to stop sharing. Okay, now that I know it's this screen over here, I will try again. Okay. How's that? Better?
Yes, perfect. Thumbs up.
Okay, very good. So as you can see here, our topic today is moving forward with social emotional learning, practical strategies and reflection for English teachers. So Luis is going to start off by sharing the agenda.
Yes, and the agenda today, we just did the check-in activity, but then after the check-in activity, we're going to engage in a kind of a brief discussion because we do have a lot to cover, but we still want to make a space for a lot of discussions and conversations. And then after that, we're going to introduce social emotional learning, what it is, and we're going to give you a brief overview of social emotional learning. We're going to talk about, because we think of social emotional learning as something that is new, but it's actually been in the field for a long time. We go back to the 1940s, and it still is there with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm getting ahead of myself now, but we share more details about the history of social emotional learning, which is something that has been in the field already for a while. So, and then after that, Hilda is going to take us through practical applications, some activities, some things that you can do with your students. Time permitting, we'll go through some of them. If we cannot go through all of them, then we'll share with you the PowerPoint, the PDF document afterwards. That's not a problem. And then we do want to give us 15 minutes at least to have Q&As at the end. All right, and we just did the check-in activity. So now we're gonna go with story time.
So I wanted to start by sharing the story of how I learned English as a second language. And so basically my parents, I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. My parents are Cuban, and they thought it would be a wonderful idea to teach me Spanish first. So in a loving, warm environment, I learned to speak Spanish. My grandparents were in the area, my cousins. And pretty much, if you've ever been to Miami, raise your hand if you've ever been to Miami, Florida. Couple people. Well, then you know that there's a very large Spanish speaking population. So I was at home anywhere I went as a very young child. I never felt out of place. But then I started kindergarten, and in kindergarten is where I learned to speak English. And I remember, even though I was 5, I remember being very nervous, and I remember trying to pay attention to what the teacher was saying, but I didn't know. And so when she would point to things, or if she had the picture to help me understand, I could, feel better. When she had songs, I could follow along the songs, and I felt like part of the group, even though I didn't know half the words. It felt good to be part of the group. And then when she had picture books, even if I didn't know the words yet, I could follow along because of the pictures. So I'm sharing that story because Luis is going to now talk a little bit about it. It goes into the next slide here, where he's going to be talking about the ways that we learn language.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, Hilda. And we love stories and storytelling. And Hilda's story specifically talks about the many dimensions of language learning. And for many years, we've been looking at, as a field, we've been looking at language teaching and learning primarily from what we say the cognitive perspective of this idea, or academic, right? Language teaching and learning is an academic activity. But in reality, there are many more elements connected to language teaching and learning, especially the affective or emotional aspects, the social aspects as well of language teaching and learning. And, we've been reflecting a lot, Hilda and I, and also, with our students and our colleagues in our conversations, we've been reflecting a lot recently on these 3 questions, and we would love to hear from you. And of course, you're more than welcome to share your thoughts in the chat box to any of these 3 questions. But these are the questions that we continue to think about. How do we learn languages? Why do we learn languages? And what is the role of culture, society, and the environment in learning languages? And we had my students and I at the George Washington University, I teach online for them. And we had a discussion this week about these 3 questions. And we were talking about, how and why do we learn languages, and the role, right, of culture, society, and the environment. And we realized through our conversations and in the readings and everything else, we realized that language teaching and learning, it's more than just learning how to conjugate verbs and how to learn specific phrases. And there is a much deeper dimension to that. And it's always connected to the cultural. It's always connected to the society, to the emotions that we feel in the classroom and beyond, right? So we would like to hear from you. We have here Natalia, thank you very much. how do we learn languages naturally and purposefully? Thank you. So there is always a purpose behind that. We needed to build a community. Pinar, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so we're seeing here already purpose. There is a purpose behind language teaching and learning. So it's connected to the affective dimension. It actually talks a lot about, Natalia, thank you very much for that. It actually talks about research that we're seeing in the field, which is that one of the essential elements for language teaching and learning, it's within the emotional dimension, which is motivation. Without purpose, there is no learning, right? We also see it here for community. It's about a social aspect. For fun, Valerie, yes, also to engage. So there is a social element and an emotional element in what we're seeing here in the responses to communicate with people. So again, the social aspect, okay, through our environment, etc. Very, very well. Thank you very much. So again, in this responses that we're seeing here, we're seeing very clearly that social and emotional, those two aspects are part of language teaching and learning. We cannot separate them, right? And this takes us actually into our next slide, which is introducing social emotional learning. And I'm sorry, that was a thunder. It's thunder in here. I apologize. I hope it's not too loud on your end. So defining social emotional learning. Social emotional learning is the process, and we love this this definition by Osher and the team. One of the fantastic article about social emotional learning. But it's a process, and we're going to explain why we put process in bold here and in green, by which children and adults acquire and apply competencies to recognize and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, appreciate the perspective of others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, make responsible decisions, and handle personal and interpersonal situations constructively. This big definition means that social and emotional learning at its core, it's about knowing how to become an emotionally stable and intelligent individual. That's what it is. And how to use those skills to be a better human being and a better language learner in our case, because we're language educators. Now, SEL is a process, it's not a program. And this is very important to know. Process means that it's a practice that each of us includes in our classroom, and it's varied. It depends on our context. You know, what some people might call social emotional learning in one context, it might be called student-centered instruction in another, or it might be called problem-based learning in another context. All of those, when you look at different perspectives and different settings, many elements that are not even thought about or considered social emotional learning are in fact social emotional learning, because students are using critical thinking skills, they're using relationship skills, they're using social interaction. All of those elements are part of social emotional learning. So again, in our definition here, we want to capitalize that social emotional learning is not one thing, but it's a multitude of things. How to become a better socially, a person who can socialize and be a socially effective individual, communicator, but also emotionally stable and emotionally intelligent. So at its core, that's social emotional learning. Now, in the next slide, we see here some notes here for us to think about. You know, some people think that social emotional learning is a new phenomenon, but it's actually been in the field for a long, long time. And it hit me the other day that Maslow's hierarchy of needs were actually closer to 2043 than to 1943. So it's been almost 100 years. But, you know, it's been in the field for a long, long time. And we know Maslow's hierarchy of needs as language teachers. We know this. This is foundational knowledge that we know. We know Krashen's affective filter hypothesis. So when we think about, for example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we think about the physiological needs, safety needs. We know all of this. We know that for students to be able to reach their full potential self-actualization, we have to take care first of the physiological needs. We have to make sure that, and we do this as teachers, you know, in elementary, middle, high school, when I was teaching in the US, I remember I always had like crackers and things. If my students were hungry, we wanted to make sure that they were fed. You know, we wanted to make sure they had water, that their basic physiological needs were met. This is part of social emotional learning. Also, when we think about Krashen's affective filter, you know, the hypothesis, lowering the affective filter, which is if they're very, very stressed, if students are very, very stressed, they're not going to learn, because then the what I call undesired emotions, some people call it negative bad emotions, whatever. I call it undesired emotions. These emotions that we don't want, that students do not want, frustration, all of these things, anxiety, stress, they're taking over. So their brain cannot focus on language teaching and learning, right? In the case learning. And for us also as teachers, we have to lower our own affective filter when we're teaching so we can be effective educators as well. So, Krashen's affective filter hypothesis and Maslow's hierarchy of needs really have laid the foundation for us to understand and address really the emotional and social factors of language teaching and learning. So they have been at the center, even though we have not paid enough attention as a field, they've really been at the center of social emotional learning. It has been at the center of language education. Also, in the next slide, we were recently working on a project for the TESOL. Hilda and I, we were working on a project for the TESOL International Association, and we started putting together some social emotional needs for all learners. And we came across this work from Salcedo, 2018, a very good book. And, she describes 8 elements. And we know this, we know as language teachers, we know this information as well. But, 8 elements that are essential for students to be able to thrive in the classroom, which is, we have here the bullet points: to feel safe and secure, to feel love, sense of worth, to feel acknowledged and understood, to have a sense of control and predictability. And, as teachers, I'm not going to go through all of them. They're there for you. But, as teachers, we know this. We are aware of these social and emotional aspects of language teaching and learning. So as I'm introducing to you social emotional learning, I'm hoping that I'm explaining that at the same time, that it's not a new phenomenon, but it's something that has been in the field for a while. And then in the next slide, I want to share with you, even though social emotional learning has been in the field for again a while, going back to Maslow's 1943, Krashen's hypothesis in the 80s. Unfortunately, we have not really made a lot of progress when it comes to social emotional learning, and when it comes to really addressing the social emotional aspects of language teaching and learning. It hasn't been until like very recently, I would say COVID kind of expedited that research that was gaining momentum slowly, but it really after 2020 started gaining even more rapidly momentum. We look at language teacher, learner and language teacher well-being, and we see, of course, the work of Sarah Mercer, Tammy Gregerson, and all of these big names with emotions and all of these elements of identity, and again, all of these things. So we're seeing it now go higher, and like it's becoming more prevalent in the field, but we're still very behind. We have a lot more knowledge on how to teach academic intelligence in language than we know how to address social and emotional issues in the classroom. So right now where we are, there are only a handful of studies right now being published about social emotional learning. But some of the things that we are learning when we talk about social emotional learning, things that we have not considered before, but as teachers that we know. For example, in a study, it's going to come out soon about social emotional learning, we learned that like the classroom decoration and the environment, giving students autonomy to, in the context of the US specifically, giving students autonomy, English learners autonomy to decorate and be part of the decoration of the classroom, that actually empowers them, gives them a sense of pride, because then they become part of the classroom environment. So they help shape the classroom environment. Elements like this that we traditionally don't think about, now they're starting to surface through research. But again, we're very behind when it comes to research in social emotional learning. But we are also recognizing, and Hilda and I, for example, we conducted a study last year, and we learned that we've known this for a while too, but in language teacher preparation programs, teachers do not get a lot of preparation when it comes to social and emotional learning for themselves and for students as well. So that means that as teachers, we also have to deal with our own emotions when we're in the classroom. And sometimes they get in the middle of our teaching. So if we feel stressed, if we feel anxious, how do we deal with that? Well, in language teacher preparation programs, they never tell us how to deal with that. I don't know if you ever felt like this, but I remember my first year of teaching, going to the classroom, and I just kept thinking to myself, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this, or I don't know how to, like in my teacher preparation program, they didn't prepare me for this. How do I respond to this situation? All of these things, right? Those are things that language teacher preparation programs are not preparing teachers for. And, so kind of giving you a brief overview here, but in the next slide, really culminating this idea of introducing social emotional learning, but why? Why do we need to learn or apply or be inclusive or social emotional learning, even I would say included in our own pedagogy as language teachers? Why social emotional learning in English language teaching? And we have this quote that we love, but and then I'll explain the bridge next, but it says here, if a child can do advanced math, speak 3 languages, or receive top grades, but cannot manage their emotions, practice conflict resolution, or handle stress, none of that other stuff is really going to matter. And you can think about, I think all of us had at some point this student who had a lot of potential. They're very, very intelligent, academically intelligent, but they cannot manage their emotion. They do not understand how their behavior affects them and others. And at the end of the day, even though if they're a genius, none of the other stuff is really going to matter if they don't know how to manage themselves, if they don't know how to be empathetic, if they don't know how to cooperate with others in the classroom. At the end of the day, emotional intelligence is just as important as academic intelligence. That takes us actually to the bridge. And Hilda and I were talking about this yesterday, and this metaphor of the bridge and the lake and the water. And we always think of academic intelligence as something that is built in schools. So you could look at that as the bridge. That's what we do as language teachers. We help students build the bridge, the language, right? We teach them the language. That's the bridge. But you see, when we're teaching them the language, the academic intelligence aspect of schools, that's always built on the lake, which is emotional intelligence. And whether or not that academic intelligence is stable, it really depends on the stability of the lake, on the stability of emotional intelligence. And we're learning more and more about this through research, that highly emotionally intelligent people tend to be the smartest people, not because they're geniuses, but because they're able to manage their own emotions, and they're able to manage and mitigate undesired emotions. Think about students, for example. I don't know if you had students like this who would get very, very frustrated because they couldn't get something. They couldn't get a contraction correct, or a conjugation, or they didn't understand the right wording or the right pronunciation, and they would get very, very frustrated and they gave up, something like that. Or for example, if you have students who are very, very shy and they never like to speak in public, their academic proficiency is only going to reach a certain level because their emotional intelligence is holding them back. They don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to manage their own emotions to be able to succeed academically. That happens all the time, especially in the language classroom, because as we talked earlier about languages, there is an emotional and a social dimension to language learning. Same with language teaching, but in this case, language learning, as we're talking about students. So again, how strong when we think about, again, the bridge as an academic intelligence aspect, the lake, it's always present. Emotional intelligence is always present, and it really determines whether or not the bridge, the academic intelligence aspect, is successful for students. So we cannot really have successful students, academically successful students, without having emotionally successful students as well. So I encourage you to think about this in your students, and perhaps go back and reflect on some of your students. And sometimes we have these students that we know they're bright, but again, they're not succeeding and we don't know why. There might be some emotional aspects in there. But now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Hilda, and then she's going to take us into the more practical applications of social emotional learning. We have a lot of activities here, but we do have 15 minutes for question and answers at the end.
All right. Well, so yes, as Luis was saying, we're going to switch over into some practical applications, and I am going to start with a quiz about Maryland leaves. Leaves as in leaves that are on the trees. And the reason being is that sometimes teachers give quizzes to students And, you know, something to consider is the emotions, right, that students go through when they have to take a quiz. And if you are from Maryland, let me see, raise your hand. That's right. I think I see nobody. So all the more reason to give you this quiz so that you can feel like a student that is not from your area. That's how they feel when they come to your class, right? So let's start with this. Are you ready? Yes. Okay. Oh, so that first leaf right there is the tulip poplar. Thumbs up if you knew that that was the tulip poplar. Oh, okay. Well, I have one of those in my backyard. How about this one? Do you have any idea what this is? Yes? You know what it's called? Maple? Oh, I see. So you said you're working in Maryland. So we have somebody from Maryland.
We
Very
do have
good.
some people from Maryland here, Hilda. We do.
Yes, yes. Okay. Well, and the interesting thing is that even if you are from the area, sometimes, of course, these kinds of quizzes are not easy for anybody, let alone somebody who's from outside. So this is a sugar maple. So you are right. Ding, ding, ding. How about this one? What do you think this is? Any ideas? Feel free to type it in the chat box. No. Chestnut. Oh, good guess. Good guess. Let's see. Chestnut oak. Yes. Excellent. Wow. I'm impressed because, to be honest with you, I don't even know my leaves in Maryland. I know a few, but not all. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Last one. What do you think? Oak. Oh, I see multiple oaks. Yes, you are correct. It is the white oak, and that is actually the Maryland state tree. So again, this is something just to consider, you know, how students feel when they come to your class. If it's something that's local and they're not local, it makes it particularly hard, makes them feel perhaps very nervous or upset unless it's put in a game format. So just something to consider when you are working with students. The next idea I have is about using idioms. I absolutely love idioms. I don't know how much you love them. Raise your hand if you love idioms. Because I think they're just so fun to enjoy. And so I like to use the positive idioms more than anything, right? Because you can really focus on the positive and asset-based approach. So the first idiom here is when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, right? And people are always like to tell me, oh, Gilda, you love to make lemonade. Hilda, the lemonade that you make, you know, every time is so good, you know? So let's share one experience verbally. So feel free to unmute yourself and tell me one idiom that you might know that's positive.
We have one in the chat box, Hilda.
Oh, okay. We have one in the chat. Idle hands make devil work. Any other ideas? If you don't want to unmute yourself, you can feel free to type it in the chat. I know that with my students, they've always enjoyed it because they don't understand, of course, as you know, and yet if you walk them through it, they can really feel like more part of the culture. So they feel like part of the group. It helps with their relationship building, and yet at the same time, focusing on the positive allows them to, you know, think about what they're how to build themselves. Oh, here we have some. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Good one, Trudy. Jack of all trades is a master of none. Ah, that's a nice one, Oksana. And then Dr. Shashi said, we cross each other's paths for a reason. Huh. Oh, and Valerie says, keep your chin up. And Francesca said, light at the end of the tunnel. Oh, and Valerie says, every kid has a silver lining. Oh, every cloud has a silver lining. Excellent. All positive. Oh, two birds with one stone. Yes. Well, I know that we could go on and on with our idioms. Like I said, I love idioms. And I think that's something else to consider too, is what is it that you love? That's the kind of thing that, I feel like you should gravitate towards as much as possible when you are trying to include social emotional learning, because then the passion will come out because you already are invested in it, right? Just like I am with the idioms. Oh, we have a few more I have to share because I love these. When one door closes, another one opens. Or the squeaky wheel has some grease. Get some, yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? Yes. Very good, very good. Here's some other examples. If you wanted to relax, right? You say you kick back, or you need to, you could recharge your batteries. Oh, here we go. We still have some more coming in the chat here. There's life, there's hope. Wear your heart on your sleeve. Hang in there. Yes, all very good ones. So yeah, so consider using positive idioms. So intentionally being positive to help them boost their feelings. So here's another thing that's so important as teachers for us when we're considering social emotional learning of our students, helping them be know that we are connected to them. And so my question is, how do you show students that you care? What do you do? Let's learn from each other here. Oh, and you can break a leg while you're at it. Let's see. So just type one sentence in the chat. Oh, check-ins. Yes, like exactly like Luis did at the beginning with the mentee. Always good. Education is a human issue. Yes. Email them when they don't show up, right? Yes. When you as a teacher listen to them, email them. Yes, so clearly having these connections, right? Trying to communicate and knowing which way you can communicate best with them, right? I know that I'm here at the university, and at my university, I don't know how it works over at your university, but I'll tell you what, I can email all day, but I may or may not get a response. But when I text, that's when I get a response. So, also knowing the best communication method. Give extended time for submissions. Yes, being caring about them in that way. Remember what they like. Absolutely. Personal details. Definitely. Ask them, listen to them, provide supportive eyes. Very good. Very good. Oh, and listening to them. So yeah, so these are all excellent ways to show that we care. Or warm talk before the course subject. Yes, because I think it's so true. If your student comes in, or your students come in, and the first thing you do is, have them pull out their books and start talking about the class, and there's no interaction that's personal, then it doesn't exactly show, that warm connection. And trying to be an active listener. Give them a chance to contribute to the curriculum, choose topics or something. Yeah, so that kind of goes back to the previous person that said, think about their interests and put yourselves in their shoes whenever possible. That links to a slide I have later on. Give them choice, involve them. Wow, we have a lot of good ideas here. Be encouraging, appreciating them. So yeah, so as you can see, we could definitely learn from each other here. And something that I know when I was first teaching, one of the reading specialists that was a kind of like a mentor for me, she said, oh, something that you want to make sure that you do to get to know your students is, make yourself a list. And so she had said, write their name down, and then like, this is a checklist. So do you know their name? You can check if you know their name. Do you know their academic level? Right? So let's say in reading or writing or listening or speaking, do you know that? And then I added in here, do you know something personal about them, right? Because that's where we really connect with our students socially and emotionally, so that they can feel like part of the class and have that relationships with their teacher, so that they can, feel like more vulnerable to share when they don't understand something. Otherwise, they might feel threatened, by the teacher if the teacher is just very rigid and comes in and just expects things to be done, and there's no time for that warm, you know, connection, as so many people said that, that show how you care about a student. So showing how we care about the student and showing that we get to know the student. Oh, and then Valerie said she creates specific flashcards with the students' names and some personal info so that they can share their intros and she can remember. Very nice. Very nice. Thumbs up if you do some of that. Something like that. Oh, good. Well, good. That's definitely a road to success for social emotional learning. Then this one, I was actually at a presentation the other day, and I saw somebody say that they like to, at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the semester, depending on where you're located, have the students actually draw a shoe. So they draw one of their favorite shoes, whether it's a sneaker or whatever, kind of shoe they like to wear. And then within the shoe, they talk about what it's like to be in their own shoes. And she says that she has found that students love this. So this is something that I put it in this PowerPoint because I liked it so much. And I thought, oh, I really need to incorporate that next time I meet with my students. So yeah, so raise your hand if you have done something like this. Oh, we have one hand. Okay. Well, Oksana, can you tell me a little bit about how that went?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Hello to everyone. Yeah, at the beginning of my classes, I do colorful cards, but a pair of, it can be a green card, and just I mix. I give just randomly different cards, and once two students have the same color, they have to interact and just ask simple questions, such as what the student's name, age, like hobby, beloved dish, or whatever. And at the end of this introduction, they report on the partner's information, what they get from them.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
And then here we have the next few slides. So I know we have just a few more minutes, but the next few slides have some links for you. So we're going to share the PowerPoint with you for you to be able to explore more on your time. But one of the things that's really, of course, a key, so that when people walk in, as soon as they walk into your classroom environment or wherever it is that, instruction is provided, that there's some welcoming piece to it. So I am going to put the link so that you can just look at it real quick. Let's see. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but let's see. I'll try. It'll point show the link. But anyways, this one, it really provides different ideas for how it is that you might create a welcoming environment. Perhaps you have things that are from their culture. Perhaps you have welcomes in different languages. It could be that you have the shoes, if they created the shoes, walk in my shoes, that you put those on a board, on a wall. So there's a lot of different ways that you can show them that you care and that they are part of your class, so that they feel like you care enough to include them, in the walls, they see themselves in the room. So, but that link does have a lot of different ideas. Oh, thank you, Luis, for including the link. It didn't come through when I did it. So yeah, so feel free to click on the link and just take 1 minute to look at it. And then we'll come back and it's time for some Q&A. Okay, so it's been about a minute. So would anybody like to share something that they saw on there that they thought maybe you could, might want to incorporate in your classroom or your organization? Oh, Shasi says that they don't have the link. Let's see here. Try putting it again. Oh, thank you, Francesca. So did anybody get a chance to see something that they might be interested in doing? Oh, you see it now. Good, good, good. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Colorín Colorado, that website, but I love that website. It has a lot of different good ideas for families and for teachers. So it's I think really nice. It's also bilingual in terms of English and Spanish if you do have a Spanish speaking population. But yes, it's very, very helpful. So I'm going to just quickly show you the slides that we are going to have for you as a follow-up, because we don't have time to share all of them now, but we wanted to make sure that you had some things to go, right? It's kind of like if you go to the restaurant, you have your to-go bag. We're going to have your to-go bag here. Oops. So we have this quick video that's like a couple minutes long, and it talks about the power of relationships, and it has Linda Darling Hammond in there sharing how important it is to consider social emotional learning and connecting with students, just like with all these ideas that we were sharing. We also have an idea in there about connecting with social emotional learning with high ability students, because sometimes we are reaching the students that are needing the most support, but we tend to maybe not put as much emphasis on students that are the high flyers or that are doing always excellent. But this particular article gives you some information about that, which I think can be very useful. And then we also have some games for adults, because just like I started, this is like full circle here. I started with the game about the quiz, made it a quiz, but it was more of a game format with the leaves. It's always fun to incorporate some games. So this link has some games such as the Whisper Challenge. And the Whisper Challenge is so that you can show your students how to focus on reading lips, because as we're learning a language, that is part of it, being able to read lips. And so if I were to say here, if I was to practice the whisper game with you, I have a list of words, and you give a list of words because otherwise it makes it really hard to figure out how to read the lips. But if I have these list of words that are all related to social emotional learning, and I was to whisper one, and you were to guess it, write it in the chat box. I'm going to do 2 different words. You ready? Okay, so one word is, type in the chat box if you know what is. Yes, celebrate. Okay, here I have another one for you. I'll do it again. Yes, mindfulness. Very good. So yeah, so just like that, showing students that by paying attention to lip reading, it kind of can help ease the tension, especially, even for people that speak English already, or speak the language that you're trying to teach already. If you're in a loud, crowded area, you tend to focus on lip reading, while you're trying to understand. So these are very good skills for, as Luis said, for active listening as well. So you want to be the teacher that you needed when you were younger, right? You want to be that teacher that cares, that connects. That's me when I was younger. And, I was seriously trying to think about a teacher that cared, connected. And I was telling Luis, I said, I didn't really have that. I was always very chatty. And so the teachers had a tendency to be very strict with me. and I didn't feel the warm, fuzzy connection. So be that teacher for your students, right? As much as you can, make that warm connection. And also include parents as much as you can, right? Because as you know, if you are working with students that are 18 or under, they're not with us all day long. So there are different ways to connect with parents. And so here are 10 different ways to be able to connect with them. And the link provides you additional information. But yes, it's so important to have our parents be a part of it. And last but not least, of course, ourselves. We got to consider ourselves. And here we have some ideas for you to consider yourself. But of course, you know, we need time and space for that. And we need our supervisors to be able to support that. So it's not like it should be on you. So I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to be here with you. I've enjoyed being here, sharing these ideas. I hope you've enjoyed being on that side. And so we want to know if you have any questions now for us. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can feel free to share questions. But Luis will be sharing the PowerPoint with Madhu so that you can have all these links and goodies. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, so you can put your question in the chat, or if you wanna, use the microphone to speak, I mean, like to just read out your question to the speaker and then to the entire, attendees. So feel free to do so. We still have like 8 or 9 minutes to do. So we'll be sharing the PowerPoint that our, esteemed guest speakers have, used today. There are a lot of links, useful links.
It looks like Trudy has a question. Trudy, go ahead and unmute. Yeah, Trudy, you're still muted.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I'm looking forward to using the links. I've always felt a need to deal with the socio-emotional aspects of what's happening in the classroom. And my, I guess, question or comment is, when I studied nonviolent communication started by Marshall Rosenberg, he came up with the concept that every emotion has a need attached to it. So it's important to know what your emotion is, but if you can also connect which specific need, every emotion has either a met or an unmet need. And I often hear about people getting in touch with their emotions and ways to do that. But for the connecting the need to it gives you, for me, an idea of what action needs to be taken or can be taken. Because you might be sad because you need friends, or you might be sad because you're having grief because someone died. And there would be different reactions, different, I wouldn't say fix is the right word, but different things that you could do to ameliorate that. And I find that one of the groups in NBC created a Japanese English wheel about emotions, so that they could use words that they knew in their language, but see it in a different context. And I would love to see the aspect of needs attached to emotions included in this, how to deal with the socio-emotional aspects of students. I wondered if anyone has seen that happening in the classroom or any research on that.
Well, there is, and Hilda, please, do you want me to go first, Hilda, or?
Sure.
Thank you so much, Trudy, for that comment. And something very important that we always like to stress in our conversations is that it's important for teachers to know that we're not school psychologists or school counselors. That's very, very important to have that distinction. So the goal is never to be teachers. We need to understand how to deal with it. It's kind of like a first response situation, right? Especially with emotions, when things happen in the classroom, how do we deal with that? And then, of course, it's about teaching students how to be more civil, everything connected to becoming more civil, more aware of their own emotions. But going deeper into that will go, hopefully that will be something that students will continue to work on by themselves as they become more emotionally intelligent. But the goal is never to offer psychological support to students, because that would take us away from our teaching aspect of being language teachers. So definitely we can explore emotions. And I can give you an example. For example, when I was working in high school in the US, we had a lot of issues with, I had a lot of students from Latin America. And even though most of my students spoke Spanish, there were still a lot of conflict, because language is not the same as culture. So they came from different cultures, even though they spoke the same language. So we started reading about specific emotions, specific values. And then that was a really good opportunity for us to explore what different values meant for different students. And from day one, we addressed the fact that we're not making judgments, we're just learning about how we interpret, each of us approaches this perspective. For example, we read once about like honesty. We talked about honesty, one of the many moral values that we were talking about. And we talked about what being honest, what does that look like in different contexts where they're coming from, and what does that look like in the United States. And then we talked about, not that it's right or wrong, but the fact that, okay, in the United States, for example, where we are right now, to be honest is very important because of this and this and this, and honesty is essential to be successful because of this and this and this. So again, we were kind of going around moral values, about emotions and how we understood it, but never going into it from a psychological perspective, because that would take us a little bit away from the educational aspect, if that makes sense. Hilda, please feel free to share anything else if I missed anything. But Trudy, does that make sense?
It does, and it makes me realize I wasn't clear in what I was communicating. One of the most important things that I learned in what I was studying was to be able to put vocabulary on feelings, and there's a whole vocabulary on needs. So sometimes it's more appropriate to say, instead of saying, how do you feel, you say, what do you need? And that I think could be applied to the classroom. I didn't mean to sound like you're going to get into being their counselor, but I've seen people's bodies just relax when they get the right word.
Yes, and thank you for that. And also that also something that, connecting how students' body feels with specific words. Your shoulders are up, or you're fidgeting, or what is that, and then we connect it to yes, that we can definitely do. And that's something that we do here, that we have we didn't incorporate it here. We have so many ideas for activities, but we only have so much time to incorporate here. That's why I shared with you some more links. But Hilda and I, we do have some activities about that, connecting to emotions, and depending, kind of scanning your own body. Hilda, I don't remember the name of the activity, but I think it was something like scanning your body and then kind of connecting that to emotions and things like that. So kind of scanning yourself.
Yeah.
So Trudy, I would love to see that the Japanese one that you were talking about. Do you happen to have the link for that?
I have it in a hard copy in some boxes. I moved from when I moved to another state. So I will try to, it was very good, and I will try to find that. And how would I send it to you?
I'll put my email in here. How about that?
That sounds great. I'd love to share it.
Well, it looks like we have about 2 more minutes left. If anybody has any other questions or comments.
I think we have. Thank you everyone for these fantastic comments that we have here in the chat box. We do want to thank you. If we don't have any other comments and feedback. Oh, we have one more here. Maria del Carmen, thank you. How can I help parents to apply SEL with their kids? Yes, Maria del Carmen, there is this, and I know I only have 1 minute, but social emotional learning, and that's something that we're lacking behind also in the field, especially with indigenous students, which is a population that I work with, indigenous students from Guatemala, indigenous students arriving in the United States. And the fact that in indigenous cultures, there is a lot of work now being done. Saskia's, I always forget her last name. She's a dear friend, colleague of mine, Casanova. Saskia Casanova, she's publishing about this, and the fact that indigenous cultures, they're looking back at their practices, and those are actually social emotional learning practices, meaning when we're talking to parents, we have to encourage, again, something that we have lost in schools, in this communication with parents on the social emotional learning aspect that usually used to happen before in school, in the household, which is talking about moral values. What does it mean to be a civil student, a civil person in society? So all of these things, these are conversations that it's going to go beyond the 1 minute that we have, but definitely establishing conversations with parents, because it's part of the culture, especially for ESOL students arriving in the US. It's usually part of the culture, instilling values in students. That's something that usually happens at home, right? And then they're supposed to replicate that in the classroom. But the communication is a big element. So email me and I'll be glad to share with you. Saskia just published about this, so I can send you an article about that.
Yeah, so we are just 1 minute over time. So thank you, Luis and Hilda, for this really great, informative, interactive session for our community, for teachers around the world. So we have seen teachers from other parts of the world also, not just based in Arizona and then also in the East States. Thank you, attendees, for making it. So like I said, we are going to share the PowerPoints to you all, and we are also going to share the video, the recording of it, and then you can access it from the EGTSOL website, and we also will send you a link to actually watch it again if you have missed something important from the session. So there is still one more question. I think maybe you want to answer, or we just want to wrap up. There is one more question here from Arpita. Just how can ELT teachers assess and measure the impact of ESL practices? Just quick 1 minute answer to wrap up.
Hilda, do you want to go over it? Perhaps some of the information on the modules.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the modules. Yes, so I know that's something that as teachers we always do, is we always have our objectives, right, for a course in terms of content objectives, and then you assess exactly what you try to impart, right, the information you try to impart. So the same would hold true for social emotional learning. So if you had some objectives specific for social emotional learning, that would help you zone in on what it is that you want to assess. So if you were, for example, trying to get students to build relationship skills, and you had a certain activity, and you could then maybe measure if they were able to have conversations, if they flowed, and so you could assess it in that way. But yes, I think the best way is to make sure you have the objective for social emotional learning so that you could align it up with the assessment. Luis, did you have something to add to that?
No, I think it's also it's embedded in the lesson plan. And feel free to email us. Hilda and I, we have a template for how to incorporate social emotional learning in the lesson plan, which actually leads to the monitoring and evaluation of that. So please do email us. I think eventually we're going to need a little bit more time for webinars, maybe an hour and a half or two. That would be good.
Yeah, I second that. So Francesca, do you have a closing remark or a sentence, statement to?
Sure, absolutely. On behalf of AZT, Hilda and Luis, thank you so much. This was informative, it was engaging, and we thank you so much for joining us and spending the afternoon with us. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone. Always a pleasure. Have a wonderful day, evening, morning. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's great.
Yeah. Bye, Luis. Bye, Hilda.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.